Okay, we are back. I'm going to start at the end of the interview and just kind of recap a little bit. I'll put the link up for the YouTube link for the interview. That way it's not taking up the screencast time. I've known Christina for a few years and her mother. Her mother's has been a great role model for her. Very industrious, resilient, like I talked about. They're really great people, and I think she shared with me a lot of stories in regards to that role reversal. And I know her mother has tried. It's just, with working two jobs, becoming fluent in English has not always been the easiest thing for her. So those are the challenges that those immigrant parents face. Another thing that immigrant children and parents face is separation. A large majority of parents who migrate to the United States at least initially leave their children behind for some length of time. Typically, especially if they are coming into the country illegally, they think that once they're established here, they could get a green card and then they'll be able to get their children. Unfortunately, that's not always the way it happens, and there is a lot of separation from the parents. These children suffer an ambiguous loss after their parents leave, meaning that it's impossible for them to mourn and heal after losing a loved one who is physically absent, because they're kind of still holding on to that hope that any day their parent is going to be sending for them and that they're going to be able to come to the United States. This is compounded by the other environmental factors and conditions of the reunification. A lot of times it's not within the time frame that the children thought it was going to be, and it puts a strain on the family dynamics and their relationships. These traumatic events and transitions impact educational success, as you could expect. High school dropout rates of Latin American children who are separated during migration are 40%, compared with 17% for those who migrated with their parents. A Johns Hopkins study showed that these separations cause significant depression in both the mothers and the children. And in a study conducted at the University of Maryland, most immigrants interviewed in this study said that they would have never migrated if they had been aware of the emotional strain that was put on their family. Unfortunately, a lot of these families, they hear the success stories and they are living for the hope that coming to the U.S. is going to have all these, wonderful outcomes. And unfortunately, all of the negatives, they are kind of pushed to the side. This is just a quick video. I am going to just put it on here. It's only 2 minutes long. It really shows, you think, why do they do it? Why do they come to this country? Why are they willing to risk so much? Why are they willing to temporarily leave their children behind? And I did a lot of research, and this was one of the best videos because it's short, it's concise, and it kind of gives you a lot of the facts.
Every experience is an opportunity to experiment and fail and experiment and fail. Every experience is something that you learn from. Central America is in the midst of what the world recognizes as a humanitarian crisis. Criminal gangs are taking over much of the region, and a civilian was more likely to be murdered in one of these countries over the last several years than to be killed in Iraq during the height of the insurgency. Those gangs are recruiting young teenagers, and if the teenager resists recruitment, will threaten, injure, or even kill the teenager or family members. As a result, many teenagers and younger children are choosing to leave their home countries and seek asylum elsewhere in the region. They're going to Mexico, to Costa Rica, to Nicaragua, and many of them are going to the United States. Since October 1st of last year, 52,000 children, unaccompanied by adults, have been apprehended by Border Patrol, and that's not counting the tens of thousands of mothers who are bringing their children into the United States to flee as well. Of course, having so many people come into the country, admittedly without papers, is causing a lot of controversy. Part of this is because they've strained the existing system, which was built under the Bush administration to deal with 6,000 to 8,000 kids coming across the border alone every year, not 52,000. But part of it's because some would like the border to be a force field, to be able to automatically refuse anyone who doesn't have proper papers for being able to set foot in the United States. But there are very good reasons that the border isn't a force field. U.S. law has an established process so that when someone comes across the border and doesn't have papers but fears for their life, there can be a way to determine if they're eligible for asylum or another form of humanitarian relief. But that's the system that's currently being overwhelmed. So the question facing the United States right now is how far are we willing to go in the name of immigration enforcement without undermining the humanitarian commitment that if you fear persecution and you escape to America, we will try to find a place for you.
Okay. How does this all relate to the psychosocial development of these children and Erickson's theory? My age group that I'm focusing on is at middle childhood, and that begins with the end of stage 3, the initiative versus guilt. Some of the challenges at these stages are for these children need to feel comfortable to explore their environment and learn freely. Erickson suggests that this should be a play age where they can practice and explore working roles. His quote in the book is, "In playfulness is grounded also all sense of humor, man's specific gift to laugh at himself as well as others." In other words, when children as young as 5 or 6, as Christina was saying, are being given such responsibility between illegally traveling to another country, or if, like Christina, playing the role of interpreter, it's hard for them to actually get to practice and explore those working roles. Erickson, stage 4, industry versus inferiority. These children need to feel productive and successful despite their extra challenges. Erickson stated that many a child's development is disrupted when family life fails to sustain the promises of earlier stages. And you could see how that conflict would occur under these circumstances. The school child begins to feel that the color of his skin, the background of his parents, or the fashion of his clothes, rather than his wish and his will to learn, will decide his worth as an apprentice and thus his sense of identity. Of course, identity being that next stage of adolescence, and this is kind of the precursor to that. It's a challenge for these kids to come to America and feel like that outsider and feel a part of our culture, especially when there are some of those language barriers, when their parents are having so many challenges that they're not able to be supportive homework wise and give that kind of support. So these are some of the challenges and how they relate to the psychosocial development. What are some supports for development? What are some buffers? Of course, as an educator, I immediately think of, and through all the research I've read, appropriate educational supports are so important. They can make such a difference. I've seen it personally, and parents with a higher English proficiency level, they're able to support those kids at home with homework, and it frees up the kids' time if they're not feeling like they have to be responsible for their parents. If separation must occur, it has less long-term effects the younger and less time of separation. It seems kind of obvious, but that's one of the main factors as well. Less educational interruption. What happens when a child is migrating and they do have that long period of time when they're not in school, then they start back up in school, and instead of being in a Spanish-speaking classroom, now they're in a brand new English-speaking classroom, and they're a year behind because they haven't been in school for a year because of that migration. Parental supports and community support, like church organizations. If parents can find support, then it's more supportive of the whole family. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Children on the Run. This is a huge study. It unveils the humanitarian impact of the situation by analyzing the reasons 404 unaccompanied children gave a team of researchers for why they left their homes and makes recommendations for a way forward. I'm just going to quickly show you. I put the link on here so that you would be able to check it out. And it looks like we're going to run out of time, so we will pick up here and on section 3.